Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football Champs After Dark. I am your host, Jim Day. It's another Friday night. We got a great guest for you tonight and a lot of good things going on. And we're going to get to that in a second. But first, I do want to say that I am a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. And, we're 16 podcasts strong, over 30 hours of podcasting each and every week. Come check us out. You can find all the different podcasts over at fulltimefantasy.com. We have a podcast drop-down menu. You can see all of the different podcasts right there. Go to each individual page if you want to listen to their podcast. Check out some new podcasts. See what you got going on. We got a lot of great guys over there, including Bob Long and guys like that joining us this year. So definitely come check us out. But let's get to today's show because we got a great guest on today. Longtime friend of mine and a guy that I've played in so many leagues against over the years and probably lost way more than I should have. But first, let me bring on my co-host, Mr. Andy Singleton. Andy, how you doing tonight?
What's going on, Jim? I'm here to give you a hard time. I'm here to talk some football and, more importantly, get to talk some defensive players with Gary. I am a big IDP guy myself, so I'm excited to have Gary on. He and I have been following each other for a while and aware of each other, but I think this is our first opportunity to actually speak one-on-one. So I'm excited about this week. We're missing Frank once again, but hopefully you and I and Gary are enough to make up the difference. So we'll see what happens.
And, of course, the Gary in mention here is, of course, Mr. Gary Davenport, who, if you haven't paid attention, he writes for everybody. Let's see. I'll go through the list. Bleacher Report, Fantasy Sharks, Fantrax, Football Diehards, Rotoworld, The Athletic, USA Today. I'm sure he even produces comics or something, too. The man is just all over the place. He's been a longtime friend of mine and one of the few people that, if I have IDP questions, he's a guy I would always go to. So, Gary, how you doing? I'm glad to have you on. We haven't talked in a while.
No, doing well. The pleasure is all mine. It has been a while since we spoke. I'm glad to have a chance to sit down and talk to Andy, and always glad to talk some IDP.
Oh, yeah, not you, Mr. IDP himself. Yeah, really. And you can find him on Twitter at IDP-Sharks, folks. And believe me, if you're not following him, please correct that now. Go follow him right now because the man has just got IDP locked down.
Let me just add this, and this kind of speaks to how much weight Gary carries. There are very few difference makers or influencers in the fantasy football space. It's oversaturated. There are people that you trust. There are people that we listen to. There are people that we follow, and we want to know what their opinions are and everything like that.
Thanks, man, Andy. I appreciate that.
Well, I was gonna say, like Evan Silva tweets out, something about a player, and everybody's changing their tune on that player. Gary Davenport changes the landscape of IDP leagues based on what he puts out, on the content he puts out. If Gary tweets something about a player, it completely shifts the conversation about defensive players in fantasy football. So that, my friend, is I don't know if I can give you any higher of a compliment, but is the absolute truth. You really shape the way people value players in IDP leagues and how they rank them and draft them and trade for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That is greatly appreciated, and it makes me wonder if I shouldn't start a disinformation campaign this summer with a few guys so that I can finally – it's the downside to – cluing in the IDP public on your favorites, quote unquote, sleepers or whatever, is that it means I never get a draft of guys. So now you've given me a couple ideas.
Sorry, I was just looking because I just got I posted this to a Facebook group, and the moderator just came and
yelled at you.
Chastising us, so apologize.
He's not chastising us. He's chastising you.
I guess so.
That's why I don't post them in any of those other groups anymore, because they got so many rules and regulations.
Yeah, whatever.
It's really getting to be a pain in the neck. I posted in mine. I posted in Anthony Servino's, and that's good enough for me. All these other groups have just way too many nitpicky rules for me. That's not what I like about doing a group on Facebook. I like to have conversations about people. I don't want to worry about whatever everybody's damn posting. So, sorry about that. If we pissed you off, guy, wasn't our intent. So, sorry about that, but Time to move on.
Well,
So let's talk some IDP with Gary. That's what we brought him here for.
ID, please. Yes.
Gary, give us a reason. Why should people who haven't played IDP before, why should they be playing it now or thinking about playing it now?
It's just when you don't play with IDP, you're completely eliminating half of football. I mean, it's an old saying in the NFL, defense wins championships. We just saw it this past year in Super Bowl 53. The New England Patriots won that game largely because they were able to hold that high-octane Rams offense to just 3 points. That was a big factor in the game. The year before, granted, it was the highest-scoring Super Bowl in NFL history, but the Eagles won that game because Brandon Graham was able to make one big defensive play at the end of the game with a strip sack of Tom Brady. So it drives me nuts that in so many fantasy football leagues, you just have a team defense that scores a few points a week, and you draft that at the very end before you pick a stupid kicker, and that whole side of the ball gets ignored. Once you play IDP, you will never go back. I can count on one hand the number of people that I've turned on to IDP, and there have been hundreds who tried it and legitimately did not like it.
Well, I wanted to actually ask you because as I mentioned, I'm in a bunch of leagues, mostly the ones run by the FF Ghost. So I believe he's a friend to all of us as well. But those leagues are
Ghost.
A little deeper, 55-man rosters, 11 guys on the defensive side. So we're starting defensive tackles, defensive ends, cornerbacks, safeties, and it's not just by groups. It's not just the secondary, and it's a full 11-man roster on defense. So my question for you in IDP, I have a couple, but going into where we just led this conversation, do you have a favorite roster depth? Do you just want any IDP, or do you prefer to have something where I got a good healthy supply? I got 4 linebackers and 3 safeties going every week, or are you just happy with give me 3 players, 1 for the line, 1 for the linebackers, and 1 for the secondary?
Oh, no, perfect world. I want that 11-man lineup. I want a couple ends, a couple tackles, 3 linebackers, 2 corners, 2 safeties. The Sirius XM Dynasty League, which I'm sure Jim is familiar with since I think he founded it.
I did, actually.
It's just such an IDP league. Deathmatch, my league at Fantasy Sharks. There are more defensive starters in Deathmatch than there are offensive starters. Now, I understand that a lot of people who are new to IDP don't necessarily want to start out with that many, but I would advise that you go a little bit deeper than just one IDP or just one at each position, because then you're essentially in the same boat that you are with team defenses. That's irrelevant. So, at least go a couple defensive linemen, 2 or 3 linebackers, a couple defensive backs, and maybe a flex. It's that way you're not necessarily overloading the new people, but the defense will make a difference. If you draft well on that side of the ball, it will give you an edge.
Yeah, the problem with playing like in a league that has, 1 linebacker, 1 defensive tack, 1 defensive lineman and 1 defensive back is that, like Gary said, they're irrelevant. You can take them with the last pick of any draft because it doesn't matter. There'll be so many good ones out there because you're only looking at starting 12 of each that it really makes them, undesirable to draft any earlier. So, I'm with you. You got to have at least a little depth to it. Make it a little interesting if you're going to do it. But I'm with you. We've been playing IDP probably since it started, Gary. I know that's how I started in this business, was writing IDP stuff way back in the day. And boy, was that a long time ago. We won't get into that though. But yeah, it's really come a long way. They've finally gotten to a point where you can break out the actual positions, middle linebackers, strong side linebackers, weak side linebackers, as opposed to just linebackers, which is great for the people that really want to dig in. And, when you start getting into defensive tackles and things like that, then it really, really starts to amp it up. And, one of the things I've always liked is creating leagues, and Gary knows this, that is off the charts different than anything else you've ever played in, because I like it to be different. I want people to be able to come into a draft and not have any clue what they're going to do from pick to pick. And there's just too many cookie cutter leagues out there for me. But I'm not saying those are bad. They're just not my favorite. I like things that are outside the box and different. And if you know me at all, I'm outside the box and different. So it is what it is. So let's keep going. I definitely want to get more of Gary's take on this. one of the things, and we were talking about this off air before we came on, is, a lot of people that are newer to IDP don't realize that when a player gets their position changed on a league management site, that how much effect could it have on that player's value. So, Gary, why don't you, expound on the effect of changing a player can do?
The biggest effect is always going to be, or at least 90+% of the time, it's going to be when you have, and this is usually when a team will switch defensive schemes. They'll go from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and you'll have a defensive end get reclassified as a rush linebacker. The problem there is that unless the scoring in that league is weighted heavily toward big plays, they just don't have the tackle production to keep up with guys like Luke Kuechly and the high tackles. So it's one of the reasons why, as great as Von Miller is as a football player, he's never been a huge IDP option. When Khalil Mack moved from Oakland to Chicago and his designation was changed from defensive end to linebacker, as great as Khalil Mack is, his IDP value took a big hit. I will say, I think in the next couple of years, you're probably going to see more providers move toward providing quote unquote edge as a positional classification, to where you can take some of those 4-3 ends and the 3-4 rush linebackers and group them together. And you might be able to start either or in that spot, but there are potential pitfalls there, because you don't want to eliminate the viability of the defensive lineman at the expense of those linebackers. I want as many guys. I'm like you. I want as many guys to have value as possible, so that there are as many viable draft strategies as possible. I want the scoring to be weighted in a manner to where the IDPs score fairly. I want the elite IDPs scoring at a level that's comparable to elite offensive players. You got to give defense its due.
So, with that being said, do you have any particular rules that you live by, especially for a newbie, somebody just starting out in IDP? Like, obviously, the bigger name players are going to be the ones that everybody, wants to believe are going to be the better values, but that's not always the case, as you mentioned, Von Miller, as opposed to a tackling machine at linebacker. So are there some particular rules that you would recommend for somebody just getting started?
Well, again, you're probably going to want – it depends on your scoring. If your scoring is weighted really heavily towards sacks, then some of those rush linebackers can have value. Most leagues you're going to want to stay away from. The question I get asked more often than any other one, by a factor of 10, especially by people who are relatively new to IDP, is when should I start drafting defensive players? And there's no cookie cutter answer for that question, because, leagues are different. Starting lineup requirements are different. Scoring's different. What I tell them is, like, I just finished an IDP mock draft at Fantrax. It was a fairly straightforward IDP league, a fairly common scoring system and lineup requirements that you would see in half of IDP leagues, I would say probably. One IDP came off the board in the 4th round. That was Darius Leonard. 2 or 3 came off in the 5th round. And then better than half of the 6th round was defensive players. I think 7 out of the 12 picks in that round were defensive guys. So if you're new to IDP and you're not sure when to take that first defensive player, go ahead and let Darius Leonard and those first 2 or 3 guys come off the board and wait for that first big run. That's when it's time to give serious consideration to taking a defensive player. You're not going to get the truly high-end elite names, but in that 6th round, Kuechly came off the board. Aaron Donald came off. There's plenty of meat still going to be left on the bone for you. And you're not going to spend the rest of the draft kicking yourself because you reached for that defensive player in the 4th round and another one didn't come off until the 7th, and you wound up digging yourself into a hole on offense.
Well, sorry to sneak in here, but you led me to another perfect transition, because I've been big in covering the NFL draft the last few years, but I focus mostly on the offense. It's hard to ignore the defense, especially, when I'm rubbing shoulders with just straight draft analysts, especially, down at the Senior Bowl and things like that. You mentioned Darius Leonard. He kind of caught people by surprise last year with how much value he turned out to produce. This 2019 draft class was billed as such a deep defensive class. For fantasy purposes, is it as deep as it seems?
I think people are falling into maybe a bit of a trap in that regard, for 2 reasons. One, a lot of the real high-end talent in the 2019 draft class was on the defensive line. And as talented as those young players are, it's rare for a first-year defensive lineman to have a big season. I mean, it happens from time to time, guys like Joey Bosa, but they're the exception, not the rule. So if you draft a Cleveland Farrell, a guy, and expect him to have a big 2019, you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment. There were just so many linebackers last year that had huge first seasons. You had Darius Leonard, Leighton Vander Esch, Roquan Smith, Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah, it was just amazing.
Absolutely. I think Devin White and Devin Bush have that kind of potential this year. Those would be my top two rookie IDPs overall. But the edge rushers, about the only rookie defensive lineman I would look at and think, okay, I can probably get, say, DL2 production out of him as a rookie would be Nick Bosa. And if he keeps missing time into training camp, I'm not going to feel great about that assessment either.
Hey, Gary, I'd like to step in here. There is one rookie I'd like to get your opinion on. This is a kid I really liked coming out of college. And, I think he landed in a pretty decent place with the Browns, but he wasn't their first pick at the place. But Mac Wilson is a guy that somehow just seems to stand out to me. And I'd really love to get your take on him.
I like the Wilson pick better than the Taki pick, the linebacker that they took a couple rounds.
Yeah, Sion Taki, right.
Yeah, I think that we'll see Wilson on the field before Taki. It wouldn't stun me to see both those young linebackers have a fairly prominent role, say 2020, because Schobert's rookie deal is getting ready to run out. Christian Kirksey has a fairly high salary. I think when they drafted those two linebackers, that's what they were looking at those guys as, was an eventual replacements for Schobert and Kirksey so that they can save money at the linebacker position, because obviously they're going to have some knee buckler extensions coming up with guys like Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward. And I think they figure they can save money at the linebacker position. So dynasty-wise, I like Wilson. I like him better than Taki. I wouldn't get my hopes up in 2019 unless Kirksey or Schobert were to get hurt.
Fair enough. Thank you. It's just something about his game that just seems to stand out to me that I really like.
Is it the fact that he's from Alabama?
No, not at all. I could care less that he's from Alabama. That means absolutely nothing to me.
Well, I've been established as the Alabama boy on this show, so that's why I gotta wave the banner.
I don't know who established you as that, but okay, fair enough. First time I've heard it, but okay. You call yourself whatever you like. It doesn't matter to me. So let's keep going. I want to talk about one of my favorite things on podcasts. It's always been, and you know that. You've been on plenty of my podcasts in the past. I want to talk sleepers. Everybody wants to hear some good sleepers, and I can't imagine anybody on the planet that I would take sleepers from more than I would from you, Gary. So, give us a couple of key names for IDP leagues this year that just aren't being drafted anywhere near the value that they represent to you.
Oh, at the linebacker position, which obviously that's the one that's going to be your cornerstone of most of your IDP lineups. There are a couple guys. Zach Brown in Philadelphia. I don't know if it's because he signed so late in free agency, but people seem to just be kind of ignoring him. This is a guy that led the AFC in tackles, I want to say 3 years ago with Buffalo. The only thing standing between him and a 3-down role at middle linebacker for the Eagles is LJ Fort, which is, I wouldn't exactly be intimidated by that. And you're getting him as an LB3, LB4 in a lot of drafts. I think Jayon Brown in Tennessee is going to have a big season. Come up just short of 100 tackles last year, added half a dozen sacks, and his playing time went up steadily as the season went along, and he wound up playing the most snaps of any Titans inside linebacker. So I think he's a next step guy. And I'm always looking for a defensive back that I can grab for 25 cents on the dollar late. Justin Reed of the Houston Texans, I expect him to really step out of the shadow of Tyrann Mathieu and Kareem Jackson, who aren't in Houston anymore. It's going to open up a lot more tackle opportunities on the back end. And I'll probably have Reed shares in 80% of my IDP leagues this year.
Okay, I got one more name for you I'm going to throw out at you, only because Baltimore, let C.J. Mosley walk. What do you think of Kenny Young?
You know, the thing with Kenny Young is I'm hearing there's reports coming out of Baltimore's camp now that Chris Board could be pushing him for that starting spot. So that's my only problem. Yeah,
wow,
that's my only.
Heard that yet.
That's my only problem with those Ravens inside linebackers is that whether it's Peanut Onwuasor or Kenny Young, we've been kind of waiting for those guys to take the next step for, I think this is only Young's second year, but he was a guy that got talked up last year in camp. And Peanut's been getting talked up every year. That's like an annual right. It's kind of like he's the Devontae Parker of IDP. This is the year that he's finally going to do it.
I can't believe you said that, because as soon as you said that the first time, before you mentioned Devontae Parker, that's the first name that popped into my head was Devontae Parker, because we go through that every year in preseason with him. And yeah, I get that. I mean, I like this kid, Kenny Young, but I didn't realize he was getting pushed like that. I thought he had a good season last year as a rookie. What he had ended up having, like 51 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks, I think. I'm trying to go off the top of my damn head, something along those lines. So not bad numbers for a rookie in that defense, especially with the snap count that he was getting.
Oh, there's going to be value to be had somewhere with those Ravens linebackers. Somebody is going to have to make tackles. I just wish that the picture inside was a little bit clearer, and hopefully it will resolve itself fairly early in camp. So by the time we hit the true meat of draft season, we'll have a little bit better idea. Otherwise, you're just going to, I mean, it's not like it's going to cost you a pick that's going to make you or break you anyway. It's just he's going to be a dice roll.
Okay, I got one more name, and this is actually coming out of the chat room. Keith, who comes and listens to us and is in the chat every week, he wants to know, he considers Ricardo Allen a sleeper. What's your thoughts on Ricardo Allen?
My biggest problem with Allen would be role. I think he's a guy that's going to be a little big play dependent, and Atlanta is getting so many guys back this year that are going to suck up a lot of tackle opportunities. Deion Jones, Keanu Neal. I think Ricardo Allen's a talented player. It can be hard for those free safeties to make hay.
Yeah, fair enough. They definitely have a little tougher advantage to try and get those numbers up. So let's keep going. So right now, you're on the clock. You're trying to figure out. You want to find that one guy you think is poised for a breakout, IDP guy who's poised for a breakout. Who you liking and why?
Well, I already mentioned Jayon Brown as a guy that I like a lot to take a next step. And that's generally the kind of player I'm going to target if I'm thinking that sort of thing, is you want a guy who's young, kind of up and coming, flying a little bit under the radar, which a lot of times means that he's on a team that maybe doesn't make a lot of national TV appearances. I think Nick Vigil in Cincinnati is a guy who a lot of people are not paying much attention to. And they forget that over the first 3 or 4 weeks last year before he got hurt, he was putting up top 10 linebacker numbers. Now Burfict's gone. The Cincinnati linebacker core is, I mean, when Preston Brown's your best linebacker coming off the worst year of his career, that's not a great sign. The Bengals were the worst in terms of yardage allowed defense in the NFL last year. That's a defense that's going to be on the field a lot. And that defenses that are on the field a lot mean tackle opportunities. Whichever of the young Miami linebackers winds up playing in the nickel alongside Kiko Alonso would be another one, because the Dolphins are going to be a dumpster fire, which means the defense is going to be on the field 64 minutes a game. Okay, now, do you have any guy out there that maybe got hurt last year that people are absolutely forgetting about, as opposed to the one you just mentioned, but somebody out there that you expect to bounce back, but people are just not talking about? Because we see this on the offensive side of the ball all the time. A player gets hurt, and then the next year when you get into drafts, they're just not even being considered. They fall really far. They were injured last year. People are forgetting about them. Who's like that for you on the defensive side of the ball? Well, Vigil would be the first one that would really jump out at me. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to come up with a defensive line. Give me somebody who's hurt. I don't know if he was really hurt last year, but Robert Quinn was just terrible in Miami. And no one is paying any attention to him. That's a guy who had 2 or 3 monster seasons with the Rams and now playing opposite DeMarcus Lawrence in Dallas. I think he's a guy, and he's not going to cost you anything. He's a guy you can probably get as a 4th defensive lineman. And it can give you such an edge to be able to add depth on the defensive line without paying a premium at it. Because I'll hit the defensive line early because the pool of talent there is so shallow that I want a couple guys that I can rely on. And then I try to come back for the depth later. And in that regard, he wasn't really hurt, but I would say Quinn is an excellent rebound candidate.
Okay, I got one last question on this, and I'm going to turn you back over to Andy because he's probably squirming in his seat. Darius Leonard, of course, we mentioned him before, had an outstanding year last year. Do you think he can build on that, or was that just such a good year that we might see him regress a little bit back to the norm?
I think you're going to see a little bit of regression. The question is going to be how much, because he's pretty much no doubt number one overall IDP. I think he's kind of in a similar boat as Patrick Mahomes this year. I mean, there's just – for him to, if he can come within 10% of last year's numbers, I think that would be fantastic value. It's just, he was so good. Now, to his credit, the Colts didn't add a lot at linebacker around him. I know they drafted the kid Okereke, but it's essentially that linebacker core is going to be the same as it was last year. You're going to have an Anthony Walker in the middle. So the opportunities should be about the same, but for him to back up those numbers, he essentially has to make the most of every one of those opportunities. Plus, he had 5 or 6 sacks, which is a big number for a weak side linebacker and a 4-3. He was a great. I pegged him as kind of a sleeper last year. You know, a guy you could get late who maybe would be an LB3, but I will freely admit, anyone who says they expected him to do what he did is lying.
Okay, well, there you go. Gary always tells it like it is, and I love that about him. Turn it over to you, Andy. You got any more questions for Gary? I think Gary has to be leaving us soon. I thought that's what I heard, but he's of course more than willing to stay if he wants to. But you got anything else you want to throw at him?
I got a bunch I would like to throw at Gary, but we obviously can't keep him all night, and
I can hang out.
Well, okay, well then shoot at him. That's why. I'd rather hear what he has to say than what you and I have to say.
Well, yeah, I mean he's our distinguished guest. I know Gary, speaks more than one language, so I don't want to limit this only to the defensive side of the ball. And we've now moved down the news and notes portion of the show in response to some of the feedback we've gotten from the first couple episodes. But I do think it is important, especially this time of year. This might be the only time of year where the news that's coming out of, locker rooms and training camps and everything like that, has more value than during the regular season, I think, because we're just looking for tidbits. So some of the things that caught my attention this week, and I'm just curious your takes on this. I don't know that it's a big deal, but Aaron Rodgers and rookie head coach Matt LaFleur, playing nice, but there was a little bit of tension that maybe has been coming out. And considering Rodgers, beef with McCarthy and him eventually leaving town, LaFleur comes in and says that he's not going to let Rodgers call plays at the line. And then Rodgers says, well, I'm really good at it, so why would you take that away from me? And then Brett Favre is chiming in and saying, yeah, I think LaFleur shouldn't, step in and say anything like that. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but is that something that caught your attention at all, or maybe something to monitor that maybe there's more, than meets the eye with egos in Green Bay?
It caught my eye a little bit in that the tone of it seemed to get kind of combative pretty quickly, and that, you got LaFleur saying what he is and isn't going to allow, and then you've got Rodgers all but saying, well, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do anyway, which is what he's been doing, honestly. If he went to the line of scrimmage and didn't like McCarthy's play, he just changed it. I don't know that it's really a big deal for the Packers until they start losing games. I mean, if they go into September and go 2-2 and then lose a couple at the beginning of October and all of a sudden they're 2-4, then yes, it's going to become a much bigger deal, especially if that offense struggles. I can't say I'm surprised by any of it. I think we've already established that Aaron Rodgers thinks that the best quarterback in the NFL is Aaron Rodgers, and the best offensive coordinator in the NFL is Aaron Rodgers, and the best head coach in the NFL is Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Best water boy in the NFL is Aaron Rodgers.
It almost feels like, like LaFleur is like the new guy walking into prison, and he's just going up to the biggest and baddest guy in the yard and like, I'm just going to knock you out now so nobody else messes with me. So go to Rodgers and start with him. But
before we move on, though,
yeah.
Well, one of the things I saw with this is that, LaFleur, he wants to run some more play action passes. He wants to run the play action pass. Unfortunately, that's the one thing Rodgers doesn't want to do, because Rodgers turns out doesn't like to turn his back to the defense. He just doesn't like to turn around. And that's what you have to do with play action pass. You have to turn your back to the defense, fake the handoff and then go into your pass play. And he doesn't like to do that. So I think that's more where he's really pushing back here, is because I don't think he wants to run more play action pass because of that effect. And he's taking a lot of big hits. I guess I get that, but at the same time, play action pass has proven to be such a big concept and so well done in the NFL that to turn your back on it, pardon the pun, seems to be a bad move.
Yeah, for me personally, I just think it's interesting because there's a very select few quarterbacks that have the persona and the resume to kind of be that alpha in the room. And then you got a rookie head coach coming in and just kind of that battle for, the locker room and supremacy. That's kind of what fascinated me about it. But one of the other new coach situations, and this was another thing that kind of caught my eye, was Ronald Jones is not really seeming to impress anybody. Peyton Barber apparently is still the preferred running back in Tampa Bay. Now, with Arians coming in, and you hope that really jumpstarts the offense. Everybody's looking at Chris Godwin and O.J. Howard as Jameis Winston even as being breakout star potential for 2019, but nobody seems to be mentioning Peyton Barber. Is this a guy that you think might have some sneaky late round value as a running back too, maybe for your fantasy team?
Given how late you can get him, I like Peyton Barber more at his ADP than I do Ronald Jones at his ADP right now. And that's, we still have a long way to go. There's still all a training camp. There's plenty of time for Ronald Jones to get it together and impress the coaching staff. And it's not, Peyton Barber is not by any stretch of the imagination a quote unquote elite talent. He is what he is. He's a guy.
Thank you for saying that.
Guy that carries the ball. But, I look at where Ronald Jones is going in early drafts, and it's kind of like Darius Geis. I don't understand. I'm all for having a positive mental attitude about the upcoming season, but given where these guys are being drafted, I'm not willing to roll those dice. I'll wait until the umpteenth round and roll the dice on Barber or Adrian Peterson before I want to burn a 5th or 6th round pick on a guy like Geis or Ronald Jones, personally.
See, I like Ronald Jones. I liked him coming in last year, and I just think he wasn't prepared for what he was getting himself into. He's always been the biggest and the best wherever he played, and all of a sudden he gets to the NFL, and, oh, man, you mean I actually have to work? And it just didn't seem like he got that at all last season. But every indication this year so far during OTAs and everything is that the team definitely likes him, that he's putting in the work right now. He's looking good in OTAs. And I'm really not sure where Andy came up with that. But the only positives I've heard out of that camp so far have been about Ronald Jones. They haven't been about Peyton Barber. Now, I'm not saying Peyton Barber is just going to fall away and Ronald Jones is going to become a bell cow back and be, a leader. I don't think that's there yet, but I do think he's eventually going to win the top dog spot on that team this year. They say he's working hard. He's in much better shape. He's putting in the time to learn the playbook. All of these things that he didn't do last year because I think he finally realized that he has to work at this level. And, it hits a lot of these guys like that once they get to the NFL, because I don't care how good you are in college. All of a sudden you go to the NFL, the guys are bigger, faster, and stronger than you are. It just, you need to work at it to be any good. And I just think that hit him and he wasn't ready for it. I think he'll be ready for it. I think Peyton Barber still is a decent pick where he's going, but this is a guy I don't think's ever eclipsed 4 yards a carry. Average anywhere. He's never been a big splashy play type of guy. He's a run-of-the-mill pedestrian running back who should be a backup. And I think if Ronald Jones steps up at all the way I expect him to, I think he takes over that number one spot. And in this offense with Arians and what he'll get him involved in, I think he could put up decent numbers. And right now he's coming off the board on FFWC ADP as I just lost him, as the 38th running back taken. So you're talking about a running back 4. you know what? I'll take the chance on him as a running back 4 with, I think running back 2 upside if he takes that role. If he doesn't, so what? And any running back you take at that stage has issues, has concerns. Nobody is guaranteed. But I am just not a Peyton Barber fan. He's just never impressed me in any single thing he's ever done.
Okay. I liked him at Auburn, but I don't know that he's long for the starter's role. I just don't really love Ronald Jones either.
Well, that's a good thing. Like I said, right now you're drafting him as a running back 4, so you're not really paying up for him either. I'll take that shot because if he does win that role, then you got another good starter to play with, somebody that you can get in the 8th round.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was leaning with that was the whole Arians effect. Like I said, it's everybody else is excited about the passing game, but that should also translate and trickle down to the run game as well if the pass game is going to have more success. And you look at Barber got 234 carries last year, as Gary was alluding to. You look at Ronald Jones' ADP, and it's more of a premium than what you're paying for Barber. So, just curious what the take was as far as that. I mean, there's a couple other offensive storylines. Amari Cooper's come out and said his aim and his goal is 2,000 yards. We saw such a transformation with him going to Dallas and working with Dak. I think his 16-game average or something like 1,300 or 1,400 yards with 10 touchdowns. So 2,000 would still be out of reach, even if he just continued that. But do you think that this could be a top 5 or at least top 10 wide receiver in a PPR or even half PPR league going forward in 2019?
I think his ceiling would probably, I don't know that I see him getting into the top 5, if only because there's enough depth at the wide receiver position this year that to get into the top 5, you'd have to put up some pretty ridiculous numbers. I do kind of like Amari Cooper, given where he's being drafted and what he showed last year in Dallas, especially relative to how he looked in Oakland before that. It was like, who are you and what have you done with Amari Cooper? He's catching the ball. When did this happen? And I think he's a good guy. He's the kind of guy where if you go old school and you hit the running back position hard early in drafts, you go RB, or maybe even if there's a flex spot, you do the old school and 3 straight running backs. That he's a wide receiver you can get a little bit later who at least offers you that kind of ceiling that's a little bit higher.
Yeah, the only problem I had was even when he went to Dallas, he was still inconsistent. But you got to expect that from a wide receiver that comes over mid-season. With a full off season of work, I think that consistency works its way back. I read a piece by Dwayne McFarland who does some writing for the rookie scouting portfolio for Matt. And, I love the way he writes because he's one of the few numbers guys that I can read who actually breaks it down in a way that a dummy like me can understand it. And so I like that aspect. Most of these numbers guys, they're throwing numbers around left and right that, I don't know. Some of these things, I wonder why the hell they even got invented. But sort of a tangent, but every time I see all these new crazy stats that they keep coming out with, the only question I always got to ask him, and this always started with Mike Clay way back in the day when he started ADOT and those things. My biggest question is, so how does that help us in fantasy football? And too many of them can't answer that. Dwayne can, and he did an article on Amari Cooper that to me, I thought was excellent. Film breakdown, gave you all, little snippets of what was happening. And he made it clear that what the change was from going from Oakland to Dallas was he now had a quarterback that wasn't afraid to throw the ball up and let him go get it. He didn't have that with Carr. Carr was always throwing the ball into his body. And Dwayne did a great job of showcasing how Cooper has a hard time with the ball coming at his body. His hand placement always seems to be wrong. He cradles the ball too much into his body, things like that. Whereas if he can go up and get the ball, he'll snatch the ball. He has no problem doing it. He'll fight people off, and he's very good at that. And now he has a quarterback that'll do that. He'll throw them the ball and let him go get it. Carr just didn't do that. So I think that's what the biggest transformation was. I think that's why I expect some pretty good things out of Cooper this year, and I've never been a fan before. I think he could definitely put up big numbers. Top 5, I'm with Gary. I don't think he gets that far, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up top 10.
Yeah, I just put out my initial rankings yesterday, and I have him at 7, and I was getting a lot of flack for that. But that's he's capable of it. We'll leave it at that. I wanted to also ask you another situation, kind of a guy changing teams. Tevin Coleman heads out to San Francisco to join Shanahan. That backfield looks to be a complete mess when you look at all the options they have, and none of them really looking like the lead guy. But people are starting to warm up to the idea that Tevin Coleman might be that guy, especially with his history with Shanahan. I personally have my doubts about that, and I still think Breida is a guy I would prefer to have, especially for where you could draft him in his value. But are you warming up to the idea of Tevin Coleman being the lead in San Francisco, and what do you see his upside potentially being?
Oh, well, I mean, if everything perfect world and he winds up emerging as the guy for the 49ers, I think he could be a very serviceable RB2, if not more. I just don't know that I expect that to happen. I mean, I don't know, unless somebody gets hurt, I don't know that the touches are going to be there. And that's the problem with his ADP. I mean, you've got Jerick McKinnon, who they just gave a fat contract to a year ago. You got Breida, who everyone just seems to have forgotten is on the team. I read something, I want to say it was about 10 days ago. It was a beat writer out of San Francisco who expects that one of those 3 running backs is probably going to be a game day inactive on Sundays this season. And that's just what you want to hear out of the running backs you draft. Is that he's not hurt. He's just not dressing.
Right.
Yeah. Victory.
Well, I mean, because Mostert, who they did bring back, is also a guy that plays very big on special teams. So that's why they were saying one of these 3 is going to be a healthy scratch, because they're going to be playing him, and they got the fullback Jusic that he's always involved in that offense. So that's probably why one of these 3. And he was speculating it was going to be Breida. They've said already that it's going to be whoever is the hot hand. And that scares me when you start talking like that. I mean, Breida had some pretty good games last year for them. McKinnon, we haven't seen in this offense, but I was expecting he would do pretty well with a Kyle Shanahan offense with all the dump off passes. I thought he would do very well. Coleman, I mean, he just hasn't. He had the chance last year on a good Atlanta team to really take it to the next level, and just while he didn't play badly, he just didn't seem to really take advantage of that to me. So this is another situation like New England where I think I'm just going to stay away.
Yeah, well, is there one guy, Jim or Gary, that you would take in that? Because as frustrating,
the last guy I can get.
Okay,
exactly. Yeah, that would be me too. I don't want to invest significant draft capital in that back. I mean, if I were to take a guy in the New England backfield, it's probably either going to be James White in a PPR or a late dart throw on Damian Harris because of Michelle's knee, and he's apparently having a great OTA. And that way, if the guy does rise up through the ranks and winds up a startable option for me, fantastic. But if he doesn't, the 11th, 12th, whatever round pick, it's not going to kill me. I don't need my 5th or 6th round pick not doing a thing for me from week 1 on.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. Well, of course, the absolute biggest news, bigger than the NFL itself, the news of the week was the SFB 9, the Scott Fish Bowl 9 invites have gone out. The field is up to 1,200, 3 of which are on this call right now. So I'm just curious, between the 2 of you guys, do you have anything you would want to mention or tell anybody, any excitement, any stories, any fascinating things about Scott, Fantasy Cares, the Fishbowl itself? I don't know if you guys are aware, I finished 4th in this thing last year out of 900. So I just kind of remind everybody as many opportunities as I get, which is why I put that in the notes right now. So if you guys don't have anything to add on this, we can move on. But Jim, what are your thoughts?
Hey, you know what? Scott has just done an incredible job. There's really nothing else that can be said. I mean, he goes out of his way to it's all for Fantasy Cares. I mean, and that's a great thing. I mean, they raised almost $45,000 last year for Toys for Tots. I mean, that's an incredible job, and I expect them to go even bigger this year. A lot of people out there doing all kinds of separate little things to get people to donate, and we have a great community. We've seen that in the past, that, you know, if you want to get them involved, they'll definitely rally behind you. And, you know, it's just amazing. And the fact that he puts so much time and effort into getting this league set up and keeping everybody happy. He changes the scoring system every year just to make it a little bit different every time. You know, I just love what he's done here. He's a longtime friend of mine. He actually designed one of my first websites, fantasytaz.com, way back in the day, and, you know, did a great job of that. And he's just been around forever. I'm just glad that he's finally getting his name out there. People actually, you know who he is and the work that he does, because, I mean, the man is tireless.
Scott's a big part of the reason that I'm a fantasy football writer. He and I were both doing stuff for free for a website that is long since it's been gone for years. And we decided that if we were going to, you know, write for nothing, we might as well do it for our own site. And thus Fantasy Football Oasis was born.
Oh, Oasis. That's right. I remember Oasis.
Yep.
And when we started Oasis, I was thinking to myself, is there a way that I can maybe kind of set myself apart from everybody else, maybe be a little bit bigger fish in a smaller pond? And that is the reason that I decided to focus on individual defensive players. So, yeah, it all started fantasy football. My writing career all started essentially because of Scott Fish. Great guy. Had an opportunity to meet him. Oh, man, it's been – I think it was either 2010. He came out to Arizona to visit his in-laws, and we were able to go out and grab a few beers together. Great fantasy football mind, even better person.
He's amazing. He has been a friend since day one in this. I don't know why, but he's been a supporter of mine. He's always had my back, and I've always had his. He's been amazing. He's been awesome. And I was just tweeting out the other day, this fishbowl has gotten so big that it's created jobs. There are people making logos. There are these satellite leagues. There are all these off brands just centered around the fishbowl itself. So Scott Fish single-handedly is helping the unemployment numbers go up in this country with the fishbowl. But
You mean down?
We're going down. Sure. Yeah, that's what I meant. Going down. Listen, you've already alluded to my not being the numbers guy on this show. So up, down, whatever. I just know he's making a difference. So, yeah, thank you, Scott, for that. But let's move on. Let's get back to some other football stuff. And we've started this little on the clock segment. So let's get back to IDP. You mentioned it before. The only two guys you're really prioritizing from the rookie class, both happen to be named Devin. Both are primetime players. Both are middle linebackers. One's Devin White. One's Devin Bush. Both go to terrific situations. Devin White to Tampa Bay. Devin Bush, the Steelers traded up for him. First time they've gone that high on a linebacker in quite some time. So can you really go wrong with either? And of the two, if you only had one, if you had your choice of both, who would it be?
No, I think they're similarly valued. I don't know that I would prioritize one over the other a lot. In redraft, I would probably lean Bush because he doesn't have the kind of competition for tackles that Devin White has playing with Levante David. But in Dynasty, I would give White a slight edge because I just think he's a superior talent.
All right. Jimmy,
really? Man, so you think this year Bush has better numbers than White?
I think it's a distinct possibility. He isn't going to see near the kind of competition. Levante David is going to be running around like a madman tackling people. And if he tackles a guy, then my guy Devin can't.
Well, it's a good point. Yeah, okay. I pretty much had in my mind that I had Devin White pretty far ahead of Bush. I mean, I like Bush. Don't get me wrong. I definitely like Bush. I've liked it for years, but Devin White, I think eventually his talent is going to win out.
Oh, I agree. Like I said, Dynasty, I think I've got them both in LB2 territory and redrafts, but yeah, White, I've got a fair amount. If I was picking in a Dynasty and was going to take an IDP, it would be Devin White by a fair margin.
All right.
Okay, well then let's keep it going. On the clock now, we turn it over to the offensive side of the ball. Got a guy who's coming back from an injury. Had a quarterback last year that now we're hearing was playing with a broken bone in his back. And Marvin Jones, he's coming off the board at number 75, basically in a 12-team league. That's pick 703. And then on the other side, you have another guy who got injured last year. Actually, he's gotten injured pretty much every year, in Will Fuller, who's coming off number 77, pick 705. If you're on the clock, you need one of these wide receivers, Gary. Which one you take?
Ooh, that is a tough call. It is, really. I think I'm going to go Will Fuller, if only because he's got a higher ceiling, and I'm going to go for that. Odds are, if I'm taking a wide receiver in that spot, I'm already doing pretty well at running back, and I'm looking for upside with my wide receivers. I like Fuller's ceiling better.
What are you going, Jim?
Well, I'm with Gary, actually. If Fuller actually stays healthy in that offense for a full 16 games, I think we could see some really nice numbers. I mean, last year, 7 games, he had 503 yards and 4 touchdowns. Well, in 9 games, Marvin Jones had 508 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, in 2 games different, he had basically the same amount of yardage, and he had another touchdown. So I just think in that offense, with Watson throwing them the ball and the fact that they will throw a lot, whereas Detroit has basically said they want to become more of a running team. And we saw that at the end of last year. They got a great running back in Kerryon Johnson. So I think they want to do that. I like Marvin Jones, and I like the fact that they got Hockenson. I think they do have more weapons on the pass offense this year. So I think they rebound that way a little bit, but they still are determined to be a more run-heavy type of team. I don't like saying run-heavy. I just think more run-oriented type of team. So that kind of pushes me away.
But that's a huge question, though, that if he could stay healthy. Obviously, I think Will Fuller's a dynamic talent, and you could even go as far as to say he might be Watson's preferred target, because it just seems
I wouldn't go that far.
I say you might be able to go as far as to he's
DeAndre Hopkins.
He's always looking for him. Though.
You can't say that. You can't say that.
Okay. Let's clarify. I said you almost could go as far as to say he's always looking for him. He's always targeting him. He's always finding the end zone with them. Not to the same volume, but still. And Marvin Jones, you see Galladay emerging. I think the problem for him, as much as I like his opportunity now that Golden Tate's gone and coming back for the injury, what we've learned about Stafford, it's just kind of a little redundant with Galladay being there. I wish he was going to be. Maybe he will still. I don't think he will, but I want to see that slot guy in Detroit and filling that, the Golden Tate role. Right. So it kind of I'd have to go with Will Fuller plus replacement value on the weeks he's going to be on the DL, on the injured list.
Well, that's a good thing. You're talking about a 7th round pick. You probably, at the very least, your wide receiver 3. Possibly even your wide receiver 4, depending on how you've drafted so far. So at that point, I'm looking for upside. And, I agree with Gary's original statement is that I think Fuller has more upside. Granted, he's been injured the last 2 years at a pretty decent clip. But the fact of the matter is, when he is on the field, he puts up some nice numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and with Darrell Bevel taking over as the offensive coordinator in Detroit, like you said, the Lions are going to try to establish. They're not going to try to establish the run. They are going to establish the run. I think Bevel's offenses have ranked in the top 6 in rushing attempts, but 5 or 6 years running.
Yeah, I can't believe they let Billy Cooter go. I just see that name, and I just think overall. I just think overalls. He's got to be wearing overalls with a straw hat.
I hear banjo music.
You hear oh man. Yeah, let's not go there. It may be after dark, folks, but we're not going there tonight. Okay, one more on the clock, and this is a good one too. I like this one because it's definitely 2 guys that really people are wary of. We talked about one a little bit, but not the other. And this is LaShawn McCoy of Buffalo coming off the board at pick 812, or Jerick McKinnon coming off the board at 901. Gary, which way are you going here? You think McCoy has anything left?
Oh, I would need a beverage of some sort that contains a high alcohol content before making the pick. And even then, I think I'm probably going to lean Shady, if only because at least he's got a resume. McKinnon's coming off a torn ACL. We have no idea what his role is going to look like. Whichever one of these guys you take, you're going to feel like you need a shower after you're done doing
it. Great way to put it. Definitely a dirty feel for either one of these guys, especially since Buffalo then went out and got Frank Gore, who ate into Drake's numbers so badly last year. Then they got TJ Yeldon, who actually did a better job than Fournette did in Jacksonville last year. So that, they brought in some other weapons, but I'm with you. I think I have to go McCoy just based on his history. If he does decide to play this year and really put an effort into it, I just think he's a better back than McKinnon.
You failed to mention the rookie Devin Singletary, who reminds a lot of people.
I really didn't fail to measure him. Yeah, no, he'll be a 2020 guy. I think. I don't think he has a big role this year.
No, well, that's if all these guys stay there. There's, we'll see what happens. I would not be blown away if something comes out and McCoy is not in Buffalo at the start of the season.
I've had a couple drafts where I've taken Yeldon with the last pick in the draft.
Yeah, why not? I agree with you. I like Yeldon.
Yeah, and he's the guy. He's got. Obviously, Shady is a good receiving back, but yes. Yeldon's got the pass catching chops too. Enough so that, given young, relatively young, played pretty well for the Jaguars last year. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think he can carve himself out, a little bit like a bye-week flex type of guy role. But it's not going to blow your doors off. But at least it's something in the last round.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, I know a lot of people are speculating that they may release LaShawn McCoy, but I have to say, I don't see them doing that because that would make them look like the stupidest people on earth because they would have had a chance to move him in last year's trade deadline, and they opted out not to because he was still going to have a big role with this team. So for them to just outright drop him right now would make them look like the biggest fools on the planet. And I just don't think they do that. Too often, some of these, situations do come down to, ego and how much of a bruising it takes. And that's why a lot of teams don't want to get off of guys that they put high draft capital into because of that. They just don't want to look bad that way. I just don't see them letting go of McCoy.
I'm with you. All I was going to say was I'm not a big fan, but Yeldon, another Bama boy. I am a big Singletary fan. So I think, maybe when this training camp starts and if he's impressing it all in the way it plays out, I'm not saying they even flat out release him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they move him for, a 6th-round pick or something like that if they can get it. So you'd be saving money on his contract. You've built some kind of redundancy there. So I wouldn't be blown away. I'm not predicting it's going to happen. I wouldn't be blown away. I would say I do want to add, though, the ADP that we were referencing comes from Full-Time Fantasy. So you can go to fulltimefantasy.com and there's ADP there, which is what we're going off. And it's from the most recent online championship and world championship draft. So this is what high stakes players are using to draft. This is more accurate ADP than you're going to find with all the Best Balls Incorporated and all the, these non-existent or free leagues that people are just mock drafting. This is legit ADP right here. So just wanted to point that out as well. But we're running down to the end here, and I'm starting to steal the shine from Jim and asking all these questions. But rapid fire, 1-word answers. Jim, I'm going to let you fire away with these, Gary.
Okay, well, Tyreek Hill, we're hearing a lot of stuff this past week. I know I am. Gary, what's your thoughts? How many games do you think he gets suspended? And if so, how many games do you expect he gets suspended for?
I think we'll see him suspended for 8. I don't know if he'll serve the whole way. I think you're going to see something similar to what Kareem Hunt got.
Okay. The Roger Craig Marshall Falk Club, 1,000-yard rusher.
Wait. I want to put my one-word answer in there.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say he gets a 4-game suspension and they whittle it down to 2 because ultimately, if you haven't been paying attention, he didn't do anything here. He just got involved in negative press because his girlfriend and her family, started a smear campaign on him. They hired, got a third party to tell everybody that he's the one who hurt the kid when the kid actually just had a natural fall. Something that they see with little kids all the time. and all the rest of the stuff of, him punishing the kid or hitting, punching the kid in the chest, all that stuff has turned out to be totally false. That being said, we've seen before the league will punish guys who bring down, negative press on top of them, whether they did anything or not. And I do think he ends up seeing a suspension. But I think when all's said and done, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets only 2 games out of it.
Well, Gary, now you know why I was skipping Jim's answer, because these were supposed to be one-word responses. And I was trying to get this show done on time for the first time because Jim's always complaining that we go over an hour. So I will give you my one-word answer. 6 games. It's what I've been maintaining. And if you want to know more, find me on Twitter. But I was getting into the next question. One-word answers here. Roger Craig, Marshall Falk Club, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver. We saw McCaffrey come close. We have some serious, legitimate candidates. Do we see anybody join that exclusive club this year?
McCaffrey.
So that's a yes.
Oh, man. Okay, it's only supposed to be one-word answer then, right?
It could be anybody. Field, just yes or no. Do we see somebody do that? 1,000.
I don't think so. That's a tough nut to crack. We got a lot of good guys, but I think they all have issues. I'm saying no.
Okay, I'm with you. I don't think we get there either, but it will be very close, and maybe with multiple players this year. And then finally, I got to save the best for last. There might not ever have been more excitement going on than what is going on currently in Cleveland, and that includes LeBron bringing a championship to the lake. So does Cleveland, the Browns, obviously when I say Cleveland, I mean the Browns, because that seems to be all anybody in Cleveland really cares about. Do the Browns finally win it all in 2019?
No, 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd say no too, but I can't do one-word answers. You should know that about me by now. The one thing I am concerned about with this team is that it looks great on paper. All the parts seem to be there, but we've seen that before where something looks great on paper doesn't play out that way on the field. And every time I think about this, I think about the Philadelphia Eagle Dream Team and how they were going to be the best thing ever, and they just folded under the pressure of being the dream team. So, we got a lot of egos on that team now. You got a young, sassy quarterback. You got a couple of young wide receivers who were best friends that have played together before that, I just wonder if that's going to be good for the team over, the long run. So we'll see. I don't think they do it this year. I agree with Gary. I think they have a better shot next year, but it will be interesting to see how this team comes together.
The dream team, because that's what I was thinking too. How far did they go? I forget. Was that the year after they lost in the Super Bowl?
It was a yeyear. Wow, my timeline in my head is
I think it was a couple years after the Super Bowl.
I think so too. Yeah. My time. Well, don't get old. Getting old, man, screws up your timeline in your head. The mind is a terrible thing to waste, and it just seems like when it comes to trying to remember when things happen in cycle, you just tend to lose that as you get older.
Well, that's why Google was invented.
Yeah, well, that so they can know everything else about you too. That's why that was invented. Okay, folks. That's us. For the night. We're going to get out of here a little earlier than we've been doing. At least it's not the hour and 20 minutes we've been doing. Gary, why don't you tell everybody again where they can find you, how they can find you, why they should find you?
Fantasy Sharks. Cover the NFL at Bleacher Report. Offense and defense at Fantasy Sharks. Do IDP stuff at Rotoworld and The Athletic. Your best bet is probably just follow me on Twitter at IDP Sharks because I link to everything I write there. If you've got questions about defensive players or offensive players for that matter, hit me up. I can't say that I answer them all because I work for 7 different websites and that has tendency to take a little while, but I'll do my best.
I will tell you this, folks. He's probably the only writer I know who probably writes in the John. Because he writes so much and so often, I don't think he has a time period of the day that he doesn't write. As far as I know, he might be writing in his sleep.
I wish I could figure out how to do that because then I could pick up a couple more side gigs.
Yeah, there you go. Andy, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is on Twitter at People's Pen. Just search my name, Andy Singleton. I should be the only one that comes up. I just want to remind everybody we're talking about the Scott Fish Bowl. I have the Draft with Giants tournament. We'll be entering our 5th year. That kicks off in August after the Fish Bowl. It's kind of a mock of the Fish Bowl with Scott's endorsement and approval. Scott is in it himself, and it's basically a best ball version of the Fish Bowl. It's up to 240 teams this year. So if you have any interest in joining that, if you missed out on the SFB9, you can contact me and get yourself into DWG5. And last but not least, I just want to say happy Independence Day, happy 4th of July to everybody. We got a big match coming up. Our women beat France today. It was a monumentous victory. They move on to the semifinals now against England on July 2nd. My father's birthday, July 1st. Happy birthday, Dad. But happy Independence Day to everybody. We'll see you next week.
Okay, folks, and last but not least, once again, I do want to say that, we are happy to be part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Make sure you check us out. A lot of great podcasts, and we're still looking for more. If anybody out there does an IDP podcast or a Dynasty podcast and wants to join the network, please let me know. A lot of great perks involved. Trips to Vegas, things like that can all be part of the package if you want to come join us. So there's that. And then also FF Champs, we're getting ready to roll out our draft kit on July 8th. So now's the time. If you want to join up at FF Champs, go to FF Champs right now. Tell them Jim sent you. Use promo code 2019 and get $40 off a premium membership and get all of the great stuff at FF Champs and also our sister site, gppmaster.com, for all your DFS needs. Now's the time to do it. The sale ends on July 7th because the draft kit goes live on July 8th. So make sure you get in there now, folks. We definitely appreciate you. You can follow me on Twitter at FantasyTaz. I'm there pretty much all the time. I'll answer all the questions you have, anything like that. We're out, folks. Definitely. We will see you all next week. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your July 4th.